metrics is a flawed way of trying to inform that.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the DevOps Roundup. Today we're going to be discussing metrics, more specifically DORA metrics. And we're going to give you our hot takes, our thoughts, and our opinions on whether you should be following DORA metrics as well. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel and drop a like if you get value. Hey, Sean.
All right, thanks, Alex. So this could either be a 2-minute video or an hour and a half long video. Um, Alex and I have not talked about what we feel about the DORA metrics and what our understanding is and metrics in general prior to this. So this should be an interesting session.
Well, let's start off by defining DORA. I think it's warranting that we at least start there, then we kind of build our way up. So DORA stands for the DevOps, DO, Research and Assessment, RA. So DevOps Research and Assessment, and it was created by Google a number of years ago.
Well, back up a little bit.
Okay.
I love to do the improv thing with yes and, but I definitely should correct you on that. Google inherited it.
Okay.
Actually created. Now I can't think. I want to name drop her. I've listened to her speak many times at conferences. You're faster at Googling as we talk.
I'm closer to my keyboard.
Yeah.
Nicole Fergaman.
Nicole. Yeah. And for some reason I had Kim stuck. Sorry, Nicole.
Gene Kim's in there too.
Yeah, Gene Kim eventually became involved, but it was mainly Nicole as a research project. And then eventually she was hired by Google and Google took over the ownership of.
But on a technicality, it was part of Google. It was created by Google.
I guess
the DORA team. Look, the DORA team that is a team as part of Google's cloud.
It is now. It wasn't original.
It was founded by Nicole Forsgren, Jazz, and Gene. Gene worked at Google.
No, I'm not positive. I don't recall him working at Google.
And conducted research for the DevOps company Puppet, and later became an independent team.
Yes. Yeah. So it eventually lands at Google, but the first number of years, it wasn't anything to do.
It was an independent effort.
It was independent research effort.
All right. So Google's got its hands on it because at the end of the day,
it's all Google now. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things picks it up. Okay, so we got DORA. So again, it's just an assessment. It's metrics for measuring DevOps.
Exactly. It defines some key metrics throughout the DevOps lifecycle that you should be measuring for if you're running a DevOps
team.
Yeah,
we're going to cover 4 metrics.
4 metrics. Yeah.
We're going with change lead time, which is the time to implement, test, and deliver code for a feature, measured from the first commit to deployment. We got deployment frequency, the number of deployments in a given duration of time. Change failure rate, which is a percentage of failed changes over all changes, regardless of success. And then my favorite, which I've seen this one for many years in hard drives, your mean time to recovery.
Yeah.
Yeah, the time it takes for you to restore after a production failure.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, I like these metrics. These metrics measured throughput.
Yeah, I agree. I like these metrics. The issues I have with these metrics is how they're how they're implemented at different companies. So often I'll go into a shop that says they're moving to DevOps or they are a DevOps shop, and they have implemented DORA and they're just thrilled that they implemented DORA, but they're not necessarily measuring the right things. They're measuring those 4 sets of metrics, but the start and stop times or the values are not necessarily attached at the right points, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, and I've seen something very similar in the past where um teams adapt, like at least they have a good intention to adapt, and then end up going in a slightly different direction and
So
might miss the mark.
yeah, a lot of it depends on how you determine or define the deployment. The type of software that you're developing may not have a solid endpoint for deployment. It might be kind of fuzzy. And if it's fuzzy, what aspect of that fuzziness do you decide to start measuring? And that pretty much holds true for all four of the metrics. If I'm measuring the time it takes to identify a change, implement it, and then get it to the customer. How are you defining your customer? Is your customer your test site? Is it the UAT? Is it the actual end customer? And I think all of those measurements are important.
Important. Yeah, I've been in countless meetings where the definition of done and what does done mean, like it's brutal.
Mhm.
Because I don't know that I've ever been on a team where any two people have agreed with what done actually means.
Yeah, it depends on what your role is in the organization.
Yeah.
If you're just a coder, you're done when you hit commit. Uh, but you're not truly done until it's tested and it's gone through security, it's gone through all the different checks and balances and got approved and has actually gone onto a deployment site, and that may be hours, it may be days or months after you hit that commit button.
Yeah. No, definitely. And that deployment could also, like you were saying, right? It could be different. Like, are we deploying to a test environment, or do you not get credit until it goes out to production? But then production deployments are usually much more stringent, right? Because there's compliance, there's change
Should be.
management, and that adds to your
Yeah,
window.
the entire time. Yeah,
So
yeah.
teams tend to cut it out to not look so bad.
Yeah, let's cut test out so it looks like our time to deployment is lower. Um,
But I think it's important for teams though, like because taxonomy and semantics is so important in conversing these metrics or any metrics in general, right? Because
yeah.
if everybody has a different definition of where the touchdown is at, then how do you keep score? And it's really hard to keep score. And the metrics, all they're doing is keeping score,
Hmm.
but you can't move the the
The
the end
goal.
zone.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can't move the goalpost at
yeah.
your convenience either.
Well, you can depending on where you are in the organization, but you shouldn't.
But
But
it's
yeah.
what the bigger problem that I have. So kind of side questing here for a little bit, but I have a big problem with metrics in general, not DORA specifically. I kind of like the DORA ones. If you look at all the metrics across the board, I kind of have a problem with just metrics in general, and that is because they are so. It, the irony is that they're so subjective when they're trying to do something so objective.
Okay.
Like beauty is in the eye of the beholder,
Yeah.
but once you get something, you're measuring it, right? But just to figure out what you're going to measure is so subjective.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
but the bigger problem that I have, other than the subjectivityness of the objectivityness, is that metrics tend to be a forcing function. Like they alter the behavior of a team,
they do.
and I have a
Yeah.
problem with that because you're not now you are not trying to do the best job you could possibly do. You're trying to not get yelled at by your boss, which is what is that? Office Space, the movie?
Yes. Yeah. 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 He's just trying not to get yelled by at six people or yelled
Yeah,
at by six people. Yeah.
right. So you just do just enough work to get your boss off your back, and that's a dangerous place to be.
Yes, exactly. So any system that is measured, it changes the system. And I love seeing metrics. I have the same concerns, but as soon as I enter a system and I understand what the metrics are, I start working to exploit those metrics.
I do
Um,
the opposite. As soon as I see metrics, I I look the other way. I look somewhere else.
so I take a look and I'm like, okay, how can these metrics be exploited? And one of the old examples is software lines of code. So
Oh, Slock.
Slock. I think that's I think it's universally agreed it's a terrible metric. And however, there are still customers that hire companies and they base the dollar
Yeah,
amount
the
for
payment.
the payment on the numbers, the lines of code, which is just terrible
The,
because
who
you
came
know
up with that?
I don't. Yeah, I'm
Why would
sure
any?
it's something government related in the 70s,
But
but
how does that make sense? Like, it's
yeah,
not like I get if you're measuring a production line, you can measure by the number of bolts used on a car.
yeah. That you would think that the number of bolts produced in an assembly line is a reasonable metric.
Right.
Uh,
But when
you
you're looking at a code, like it's an art. You're not gonna grade Picasso by the number of brush strokes he did.
exactly. Yeah, but
Mona
that's
Lisa had two brush strokes too little.
yeah.
Poor
Well,
Leo.
they left out the eyebrows, right?
Yeah.
It was only a few more strokes, um, but but yeah, there's a classic Dilbert cartoon on that where Wally just starts, creating lines of code for no reason because that's what he's being measured on is the number of lines of code. Something that could have been accomplished in one line of code, he's doing 10,000 lines of code because that's what he gets measured on. And pretty much as soon as you define your metrics and you publicize what the metrics are to your team, um, there's whether it's conscious or not, people are working to achieve those metrics and make those metrics look as best as they can. um,
Especially when they're tied to your performance reviews.
well, 100% because they're usually tied to performance
Yeah.
reviews.
Because my wife was on a program one time early in her career where if she broke the build more than 2 times, that was negatively impacted. Like her performance review was out of 5 points. And if
Mhm.
you didn't break the build at all in a year, that was you get all 5 points. But if you broke it 2 times, the highest you can score was a 4. And then you went down from there. I'm like, well, this is the dumbest thing ever. Why would I even write any code?
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. So she just didn't write code for the year and got a perfect review.
Yeah,
I'm
like I
assuming
wouldn't.
other aspects would be, number of features or something that you wrote.
It's just
But
you gotta be. It's a slippery slope metrics
mhm, it
when,
is.
especially when you have weak leadership.
Yeah, you are 100% correct. Yes. Then you'll find the weaker leadership does definitely focuses on the metrics and nothing else. Um,
And
but
I've been in so many meetings where the meeting was literally let's review the metrics, and so you spend your time in between meetings to prep the metrics in a 24-hour window.
mhm,
And so your life is like literally like just create. Like I had that job for like 6 months
yeah.
where I would meet at like 3 p.m. and we'd go to like 5 p.m. It was a 2-hour meeting. And in that 2 hour, we'd review all the metrics from the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
So as soon as you walked out at 5 p.m. until 3 p.m. the next day, your job was to prep the metrics for the next 2-hour meeting.
There was a customer that will remain nameless, that we were brought into to convert them from one project management system to another. In fact, I would normally call them like a change management system. Um, and we were the third team to attempt to do this. And after, like this should not be difficult. We just going to do a data export import from one tool to another after setting up workflows and things like that. And I'm being vague on
The
the product
details.
here.
Yeah.
um, but looking at it, it's like, okay, the last two teams did the exact same thing. There's already data in the new tool that's already set up. The workflows are already there. That we have to refresh the data, putting it in there. It turned out that there was one key stakeholder in the whole system that did not want to go to the new tool because he knew how to manipulate the metrics in the old tool. So, and he was the only one that could. So, anytime uh, they had a meeting to review the metrics, he was hand jamming and configuring the metrics the way he felt they should be
Oh my.
for the meeting and not the reality of what the tool was really reporting.
Yeah.
Going to the new tool, he didn't feel he had the same value, so he or the same approach. So he was purposely sabotaging the migrations each time.
Yes, I got a very similar story. So when I was a DevOps engineer, which is check out our other episode on what so you can get our thoughts on what it means to be a DevOps engineer. But when I was a DevOps engineer, my manager gave me a responsibility. So the way our structure worked was we were like a team of 9 DevOps engineers, but each one of us was loaned out to a product. And
Okay,
so that product had their software engineers, their testers,
not a space, a project, right?
and I wouldn't even call it a project. It was literally well, it was one of the planes, right? And like every plane had a team of engineers, and I
Okay.
was a DevOps representative for that team. So I was there to help them with their merge conflicts and
Mhm.
and all the Jira, Team City, all their builds, Maven stuff, right? Just do all that stuff. But one of the things my manager had us do was we found a tool that is Click. I don't know if you ever heard of it. QLIK.
Yes. Yeah.
And this was a really neat tool. It was like a stoplight metric because I think appropriate to the topic, right? Talk about if you want to like create metrics that are in, uh, exciting for executives, get a stoplight chart on there.
Yeah.
Red, yellow, green. You'll get every executive super excited,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So this click thing was like a red, yellow, green type of chart, but it dug all the way down to the source code. So if there was a bug that was introduced or some vulnerability, like it triggered everything red, and you can dig in and you can go into like the class, or you can go to the file in the class and then the function and then the actual line of code that was causing the problem, which I thought was cool. And
Yeah.
so our manager was like, "Hey, go to your respective programs and tell them you got to use this. This is the way we're doing it." And Slack was counted through this team now, through
Oh,
this
okay.
tool, right? And we build on Slack.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I had like 6 months on the job, and I go to the program manager. I was like, yeah, so my boss says y'all got to like switch over to this new stuff. And he's like, with the straightest face, he's like, Alex, we're not doing that. I'm like, okay. So I went back to the boss, my boss, and I'm like, the homie said no. And he's like, well, you tell the homie we're doing this. So I'm like, I'll go back to the homie and I'm like, hey, so my boss is pretty adamant, like, we're doing this. And he's like, well, again, with the straightest face, he goes, Alex, if we switch over to this, we're all out of a job. I had to massage these metrics so hard to make us look like we're actually a functioning team that if I
Right.
were to show what's actually in there, we'd all be fired. Like the whole company was shut down today.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. Well, that's pretty much the same thing that we discovered, but in a much a much higher level.
Which then begs the question as to like why in the world then do we have metrics?
Hmm. Yeah.
Like I don't get their purpose. Like I feel like if a team has metrics, they're measuring, they're trying to make up for something, right? They're trying to compensate for a lack of something,
A
whatever
lack
that
of
something is.
understanding of what their teams actually do day to day to produce a product.
Right.
And so the upper management has, there's a gap of knowledge there. If you're an executive, you should know your numbers. It's something that I argue with my my team all the time. That a leader should know the numbers of the health of their organization, whether it be software metrics or financial numbers and things like that. Um, and so the higher up you are on the food chain, the less you understand what's happening down at the bottom. And
So, release team, DevOps tool specialists. We provide professional services and software reselling around the leading software DevOps tools like Atlassian, GitLab, GitHub, JFrog, and others. To talk with us about DevOps, here's our contact information. Please call 866-887-0489 or via email at info@releaseteam.com.
bottom. And metrics is a flawed way of trying to inform that. And some
But
metrics are better than others. Yeah.
it just creates this arbitrary world, a superficial world,
Hmm.
because everybody is trying their best to look the best.
Yes.
Nobody's going to report that they made a catastrophic failure mistake.
No, that's
And so then, like, I just feel like metrics just defeat the purpose, which is kind of why I like the DORA metrics, because out of all the metrics out there, like, I feel like the DORA metrics are probably the most, I don't want to say pure, but they're effective metrics to help you actually understand, is my team actually moving the needle in some direction without making it super subjective.
Yeah. Well, so part of that is because the no blame culture is kind of built into the DORA metrics. Maybe not directly, but definitely indirectly. So none of those metrics, unless they're misused, are putting the blame on any one individual or team. They may say, okay, because the mean time to repair is longer than the industry average, that's an area we need to look at. But it's not necessarily saying that so and so picked poor quality materials or a bad end system to put our application on. It's just saying that this is longer than industry standards, and we should look at what we need to do here. It's not looking at individuals' lines of code, and Alex contributed 10K, but Sean only contributed 2K this particular time period, and because none of that stuff makes any sense whatsoever. So DORA is not looking at those type of metrics, but those are often type of metrics I see a lot. In fact, some of the reports directly from your favorite tool, Jira, allows you to drill down on a per user and how many, work items they completed in a particular time span, or, if you're using sprints or something, in a given sprint, who did the most tasks and completed the most story points, if you're using story points and things like that. Those are bad metrics.
Yeah, because again, they're so subjective, right? They're not only they're subjective, but then they become superficial. I worked on a team where you bid the contracts on story points as well. And so you threw a number out to like 5,000 story points. Well, the moment you did that, and the moment you were awarded a 5,000 story point contract, then it didn't matter what the work was, because the project at the end of the day had to conform to 5,000 points.
Yeah.
Because
So
if it didn't, then
at the beginning of the project, they're very stingy with story points, and like, okay, I'm only going to give you 1 for that, even though I knew it took you 5. But then towards the end of the project, they're either super stingy with the points, or they're like just throwing the points out left and right. Why don't you take 100 for that that task, because we need to burn.
Take an extra 100 just for fun.
Yeah. This other 100's on me.
But these line, I mean, you as a company, if you're rolling out metrics, one, I would recommend take a look at the DORA ones, because again, out of all the metrics I've seen, they're not that bad. But you want to be careful to not have vanity metrics either, right? Because things like lines of the SLOC, right? Lines of code written, the number of commits, the number of story points you completed, those can be gained so much that it becomes irrelevant. It's an irrelevant number. I am, as an individual contributor, my numbers are going to align.
Oh yeah. As soon as I see a system with metrics, I want to start gaining the metrics. I want to start exploiting them and taking advantage of what is being measured. And most engineers are probably the same. At the end of the day, I want the project to be successful. But on the path to being successful, I'm looking to see how I'm being measured, and I'm going to make sure that I'm measured in the best light possible.
No.
And if they're only really looking at metrics, then that people start gaming the metrics on that.
Now you're a pretty smart individual. I wanted to go ahead, finish your thought, and then I'll ask you my.
I was going to say the one thing to keep in mind with DORA is it was based on cloud-based products or projects. So they really looked at things like Etsy, Netflix, and those type of products. So it's assuming that you're deploying dozens, hundreds of times a day.
Yeah, it's a SaaS. It's in a SaaS model. You're not going. Other models are not going to take advantage of it as well.
There's a lot of non-SaaS models out there in the software world that it's going to be hard to adapt DORA to.
I don't know,
It's
man. Tesla.
not impossible, but it's difficult.
Tesla knocks it out every day. You got that status, you got that update in your car waiting for you. Do you think we'll ever have an episode of DORA where we don't mention Tesla or Elon?
I don't know. We were doing so well in this episode, and then right towards the end here, you had to slip in, Mr. Moss.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question, because when it comes to the food chain, you're farther up and ahead than I am, and I've been having this debate internally for the last 6 months with a team that I've been working with, right? But as an executive, what is the responsibility of the executive to provide the guidance of what metrics they want to see versus the team coming up with the metric? Like who should come up with what are we going to measure? Is it somebody up high who's reviewing these metrics, or is it the team down low that's kind of masters of their own destiny at that point?
I think it's a combination, but I think the heavier lifting needs to come from down below. And the executive has the final decision on which ones he's going to accept or not.
But isn't that cheating then? Because you're masters of your own destiny.
But you should be masters of your own destiny.
I just feel like that's cheating though. Like you wouldn't take a test and like pick the questions that you want to be on the test.
No, but so if we use that analogy, you don't, the people coming up with the questions are not the executives. You have a team of people that should be well versed in whatever the subject is you're coming up with a test for, coming up with all the questions. So to map this to our friends at Atlassian, when they're coming up with test questions, they're reaching out to subject matter experts to come up with those questions. Now, ultimately, those people would probably be ones taking the exam at some point, and so yeah, that's where that knowledge should come from. Now, Atlassian, as the executives, have the final decision on what questions make it into the exam, and probably how they reword the questions, what guidelines they put, what guardrails they put in place, and going back to the metrics, that's what the executive team should be doing. Is they get all the information on what can be measured from the SMEs or the technical team, and then they put the guardrails around that, and they pick and choose which ones they want. They may throw out a number of them wholesale and then say, hey, but these rise up to what we need to be measuring. And the executives aren't working in a vacuum. They're probably pulling in the financial analysts and the overall requirement management people that have bid out the contract or whatever we're building, if we're building it for end customer versus just building something that we hope customers will buy.
And I think as we start to wrap up this episode, the last kind of topic or thing that I'll leave you with is, whatever you do decide and however you decide to do your metrics, you want to be cautious, because your metrics, whether you see it or not, have a direct correlation to your attrition. Right? If your developers feel micromanaged, if your developers feel like the bar's too high, the bar's too low, maybe they're not being challenged enough, maybe they're being challenged very unfairly or poorly, they're gonna do something, right? They're gonna either leave or do something.
Going back to the lines of code, they're being measured against something that's stupid.
Make it make sense.
Yeah, make it make sense. Excuse me. But there was one other thing I was going to say. Now I forgot it. But with metrics, it's very important that once you establish the metrics, you keep them consistent. So if you're going to, let's say, adopt DORA metrics on a embedded system, so something that's not SaaS model, you can do it very successfully, but you have to determine what the true endpoints are on what you're measuring. So if I'm doing mean time to repair is very easy to define on a embedded type system. So you're go back to your hard drive example. That's very much an easy place to define how long it takes to repair the end system. But deploying is difficult to define. But once you do define it, whether it's as soon as you get to a test system, that's considered your endpoint for I did a deployment. Keep it there.
Yeah.
Don't move it around, because what will eventually happen is someone will want to compare this quarter's metrics against last quarter's metrics. And if you adjusted it for reasons, then you just broke the metrics over
Yeah.
time.
And trends is definitely a popular measurement.
Oh, that's 100% what they always want to look at is the trends. Are we doing better this quarter than last quarter?
Or yesterday than today.
Yesterday and today, this release versus the last release.
Yep.
And they want to know that. So.
And so yeah, well, folks, that's our 2 cents on DORA metrics in general. And let us know in the comment section, what kind of metrics do you have in your team? Are you using DORA? Are you using something else? And if you're an individual contributor watching this and you're frustrated, like you might have heard from our voices today, let us know down below as well. We'd love to hear those horror stories. Maybe we can do a deeper dive or take a look at some reactions for other comments or metrics that other people have.
We did pretty good. We didn't end it in 2 minutes, and we didn't take an hour and a half.
And with that said, folks, thank you so much. If you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button now. We're trying to get to 100 subscribers so that we can get our first guest on board. And make sure you drop a like, share with your coworkers, colleagues, anybody else who has suffered from metric fatigue or metric anxiety. Let us know down below, and we'll see you in the next one.
All right. Goodbye, everyone.